the Great Pyramid of Giza. For nearly 5,000 years, a simple story has been told: that Pharaoh Khufu built this massive structure to serve as his tomb. It is said that it was constructed by thousands of workers in just over 20 years, armed only with primitive copper chisels, ropes, and unwavering determination. But here is the problem. Everything you think you know about the pyramids is not based entirely on solid facts. Instead, it is largely based on educated guesses, at best. And even today, archaeologists and researchers still disagree on many of the fundamental details surrounding the construction of the Great Pyramid. How was this massive structure built with such incredible precision? How were millions of stone blocks, some weighing tens of tons, transported? Why was the pyramid designed in this specific way? And are there still secrets yet to be discovered? In this video, we will try to reach the full truth as much as possible, based on the evidence and archaeological discoveries made by scientists up to this day. But before we uncover the mysteries behind the construction of the Great Pyramid, and before we explore the many theories that have sparked debate for decades, we must first answer the question that has divided researchers and fascinated millions around the world: who really built the pyramids? But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. This helps us continue producing more high-quality documentary content. Now, my friend, let's answer one of the most frequently asked questions whenever the pyramids are mentioned. Who built the pyramids? To answer this question, let's rely on the opinion of one of the most famous archaeologists in the world, the Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass. Zahi Hawass is considered one of the most prominent names in the field of Egyptology. He has participated in many important archaeological discoveries and has spent decades introducing ancient Egyptian civilization to the world and revealing its secrets. When he was asked this question, his answer was clear and direct. But let me ask you a question. If you are standing in front of the Great Pyramid right now, and you look at its massive size and incredible precision, you might find it hard to believe that humans who lived more than 4,000 years ago were able to build such a structure. For this reason, over the years, many theories have appeared trying to explain the construction of the pyramids in different ways. Some even went further and claimed that aliens built the pyramids. One of the most famous people who talked about this idea is Joe Rogan, an American media personality and podcast host known for discussing history, science, and controversial theories. But let's imagine for a moment that this idea is true. If aliens had come to Earth and actually built the pyramids, wouldn't they have left any traces behind? Wouldn't they have left tools, remains, or any physical evidence proving their existence? It is logical to expect at least one piece of evidence pointing to that. But the truth is, scientists have not found any evidence supporting this theory. On the other hand, we have real and multiple pieces of evidence that clearly indicate that the ancient Egyptians were the ones who built the pyramids. The first piece of evidence is the tombs of the workers who participated in building the pyramids. Archaeologists discovered workers' tombs near the pyramid area, containing hieroglyphic inscriptions and job titles that describe the roles those people had during construction. The second piece of evidence is the inscriptions found in the tombs located west of the pyramid. These inscriptions describe the people who participated in the project and provide important information about the organization of work and construction teams. The third piece of evidence consists of the eastern tombs near the pyramid, which contain the wives and children of the king and members of the royal family. confirming the site's connection to the era of the king during whose reign the pyramid was built. But the fourth and most important piece of evidence is the famous Wadi al-Jarf papyrus. This papyrus was discovered years ago by the French archaeologist Pierre Tallet, and it is one of the most important discoveries related to the construction of the Great Pyramid. The papyrus contains diaries written by a foreman named Merer, who worked during the reign of King Khufu. The text states, "I am the foreman. My name is Merer. I am from the Delta, and I supervise 40 workers." For the first time, we have a written record from a person who lived in that era, speaking directly about the work carried out for King Khufu. When we combine all this evidence together, workers' tombs, inscriptions, royal tombs, and Merer's papyrus, the picture becomes very clear. The pyramids were not built by aliens. They were not built by a lost, mysterious civilization. They were built by the ancient Egyptians, with effort, knowledge, and organization, leaving behind one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. And now that we know who built the pyramids, there remains one final question. Why did the ancient Egyptians decide to build these massive structures in the first place?
For thousands of years, every civilization looked at life in a completely different way. For example, the ancient Greeks were deeply fascinated by art and theater. The theater was a central part of their culture and daily life. One of the most famous examples is the Theater of Epidaurus, a masterpiece of ancient Greek architecture. The Romans, on the other hand, focused heavily on entertainment and massive public arenas. Their most iconic example is the Colosseum in Rome, a gigantic structure that hosted gladiator fights and public events, reflecting the power of the Roman Empire. But when we turn to the ancient Egyptians, we find something completely different. The ancient Egyptians believed that death was not the end, but the beginning of another life. A permanent life they called the afterlife, or the world beyond death. Because of this belief, their focus was not only on life in this world, but on preparing for the next one. When a person died, they were often buried with their personal belongings, clothes, shoes, and tools, as if they would need them in another life. But for kings and wealthy people, tombs were not just burial places, they were eternal homes. At first, tombs were simple structures known as mastabas. A mastaba was a flat rectangular structure built above a burial chamber, marked with the name of the deceased, acting as a kind of tombstone. But over time, this idea began to evolve. The wealthy wanted larger and more impressive tombs, and the kings wanted something that would last forever. And this is where we begin to understand something deeper. As the Egyptian architect Hassan Fassi once explained, the ancient Egyptians were born architects because they did not only build walls, they designed space itself, the experience of moving inside a structure. In other words, a tomb was not just a building, it was an entire world designed for the dead. Instead of simple graves or statues like in other civilizations, Egyptian tombs became complex architectural spaces. They could include multiple rooms, burial chambers, storage areas, and spaces for visitors, almost like a complete house for the afterlife. Over time, this concept became even more advanced, with tombs filled with furniture, clothing, and personal belongings, as if preparing for a second life. But this was only the beginning. Everything changed during the reign of King Djoser. He came to power during a turbulent period in Egypt, a time of instability and internal challenges. But Djoser managed to unite the country again, marking the beginning of the Third Dynasty and a new era of stability. And he had one ambition. He did not want an ordinary tomb. He wanted something eternal, something that would make his name live forever. This is where Imhotep enters the story, his chief advisor and architect, and one of the first known engineers in history. Imhotep's name in ancient Egyptian roughly means the one who comes in peace. He designed something unprecedented. It started as a large mastaba, far bigger than anything built before, covering around 4,000 square meters. But the design did not stop there. Imhotep began stacking mastabas on top of each other, one layer after another, until it transformed into a stepped structure. And that is how the first pyramid in human history was born, the Step Pyramid of Djoser. It was not just a tomb, it was a revolution in architecture. At the time, it became the tallest stone structure in the world, and this idea did not stop there. It became a model, followed and developed by future pharaohs, until it eventually led, just a few generations later, to the era of Khufu and the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The pyramids of Giza are among the structures that have puzzled scientists and researchers for centuries, especially the Great Pyramid of Khufu. It is made of 2.3 million stone blocks, and these stones are extremely heavy, with some weighing over 70 tons per single block. At the same time, the pyramid reaches a height of around 150 meters. I know most of us don't like numbers, but these figures are truly massive. How did those ancient Egyptians manage to lift such heavy stones to such an incredible height? This task is difficult even for us today, despite all the technology, machinery, and advanced construction methods we have. So how were people over 4,000 years ago able to build something like this without modern tools, machines, or equipment? Only simple metal tools and wood. And even more surprising, how did they stack the stones so precisely, without any cement or adhesive materials? The answer is either one of two possibilities. Either there is a huge secret we have not fully discovered yet, or they had a very simple construction method, so simple that no one ever thought of it. But let's continue and explore further. There are many theories about how the pyramids were built, some rejected, some accepted, and some even quite strange. For example, one theory claims that aliens built the pyramids. However, we have completely rejected this idea and explained why it does not make sense. Another strange belief is that ancient Egyptians were giants, similar to the Titans in Attack on Titan, and that they could easily lift and move these massive stones with their hands. Of course, this is also incorrect. The ancient Egyptians were not giants at all. Their heights were completely normal. This is proven by mummies found in museums, which show normal human proportions. Even the coffins found in tombs and pyramids are normal-sized as well. So in reality, they were just like us, just without the belly. The traditional story we were told when we were young says that the stones were transported from southern Egypt to the Giza Plateau, and that 2 million stones were moved over long distances. Then they built a huge earthen ramp around the pyramid and dragged the stones upward using wooden logs, ropes, and manpower. And that's how the pyramids were built. But we need to stop here for a moment. Scientifically speaking, this method has serious problems. For a ramp to support 70-ton stones, it would need to be extremely strong, almost like reinforced concrete. A simple dirt ramp would collapse immediately under that weight, and wooden logs would also not survive such pressure. At minimum, steel wheels would be required, so this explanation is not very logical. And even if we assume it was possible, the ramp itself would have to be enormous, at least 10 times bigger than the pyramid. Some researchers even argue that building and later removing such a ramp, without leaving any trace, would be an even greater achievement than the pyramid itself. But no physical evidence of such ramps has ever been found. More recent theories suggest something interesting. During stone dragging, the Egyptians may have poured water on the sand to reduce friction and make movement easier. This could reduce the required force significantly. As for transporting the stones from southern Egypt to Giza, some researchers believe the area was once full of water channels connected to branches of the Nile River, so the stones may have been moved using waterways. Still, all of these are theories, and many questions remain unanswered. The biggest question is still, how did they lift these massive stones to such extreme heights without cranes or modern machines? No one has a confirmed answer. Did the ancient Egyptians have a device that could cancel gravity, allowing stones to float easily? There is no evidence for that idea either. Let's move to another point. How were the pyramid stones fixed together without cement? One old explanation suggests something called air vacuum bonding, meaning that air was removed between stones, causing them to stick together like glue. But there is no scientific evidence for this idea, and vacuum technology itself requires advanced equipment, so it remains only speculation. One of the most amazing things about the pyramids is the extreme precision of the stone surfaces. The blocks are shaped like perfect geometric forms, cubes, rectangles, and prisms. Imagine achieving this level of accuracy using only primitive tools. Just leveling 2 million stones would require unimaginable effort and precision. At this point, most traditional explanations start to fall apart. So let's continue. What if I told you that the stone blocks were not carved at all, but were actually cast in place, like modern concrete? This theory was suggested by researchers such as Erich von Däniken and Joseph Davidovits. They proposed that the Egyptians knew how to create an artificial stone mixture stronger than modern concrete. It was made from clay and chemical materials, heated and then poured into molds. When it hardened, it became like natural stone and could last for thousands of years. With this idea, many problems disappear. No need to cut stones with extreme precision, no need to transport massive blocks, and no need to lift them to great heights. Everything would simply be poured into place. But how did scientists reach this idea? It started when researchers scanning the pyramids noticed strange and inconsistent readings. Even though their equipment was working correctly, the data didn't make sense. The only explanation was that the stones contained unusual amounts of water, which is not normal for natural rock. This led them to believe the stones might be artificially made. Joseph Davidovits then tried to recreate a similar mixture, and the experiment showed positive results. He managed to produce stone-like materials with similar properties. Today, researchers are still studying this idea, trying to discover the exact composition of this possible mixture. They believe it may be one of the secrets of ancient Egypt, along with astronomy, chemistry, and mummification knowledge. In the end, the pyramid stones may have been a type of artificial rock, similar to concrete, poured into molds and left to harden. This could also explain other ancient structures like temples and obelisks. However, this is still only a theory, not a confirmed fact, and another explanation may appear in the future that gives a clearer answer. Finally, no one can deny that the ancient Egyptians reached an incredible level of knowledge in some fields that we are still trying to fully understand today, even with all modern technology we have.